Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for the Knative InstallFest. My name is Greg Wallace, and it's a real pleasure for me to welcome you today. So, Chris, if you don't mind moving to the next slide for me. So we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. Unfortunately, Sebastian did run into some travel issues, and so he is not able to join us. But we are really delighted that Carlos Santana, who is a Knative maintainer, as well as a member of the steering committee, is here, and he will be going through some kind of introductions, why Kubernetes users should be using Knative. And then we have Samir Naik and Chris Parlett from TriggerMesh, who are going to get into the more technical details. So without further ado, let me ask Carlos to quickly just say a few words of introduction about himself, and then we'll go around to Samir and Chris, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, my name is Carlos Santana. I'm part of the steering committee for Knative and also the working lead we have a working group of user experience and docs. And also my day job, I work as an architect in IBM Cloud. So excited to be here.
Great. And then I'm Chris Parlett. So I'm a solutions architect at TriggerMesh. And so we do a lot with Knative and Kubernetes, as well as the TriggerMesh product. So I'm out of the Washington, D.C. area. And so, yeah, you can see my contact details there. But yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, hi, my name is Samir. I work at TriggerMesh on Cloud Native. I'm a senior SRE at TriggerMesh. And also a community member of the Knative project. So I'm happy to be here.
Take it away, Carlos.
Okay, yeah, welcome everyone. We see people joining, so welcome. And any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Here, Knative is a open source project, part of CNCF. It joined in last month, but it has been around for a while, being used by end user companies and also cloud providers. For example, myself, IBM Cloud and Red Hat, we have products that build on this software. So it's very give you a lot of confidence on this. So one of the reasons you should use Knative on top of Kubernetes, Knative is an extension to Kubernetes, makes it easy to use. For example, a simple abstractions, and when we say that, is like less YAML in your world is better. So instead of configuring things and trying to hook them together with different resources, we provide you a simple way of one resource to configure that all the things that go together. And we'll go into details on that, of like, do I create a deployment, a service, an ingress, a certificate? All these things, we make it simple. But one of the things that make it serverless, Knative, is the auto scaling. We extend Kubernetes to take advantage of the auto scaling, but we provide auto scaling based on concurrency. So this allows us to scale down to 0 based on concurrency. And the problem that we solve for you is scaling from 0. When you don't have traffic, we are watching that traffic for you and scaling your pods if you're working with Kubernetes, and then allowing you to do a traffic shifting with that traffic. So sometimes you want to do a beta, sometimes you want to do a canary release, so you can choose how much traffic do you send to those new revisions. So that's the aspect of like those microservices, web apps that you want to define in your cluster, and maybe you want to, have more configurations, more application, but not sitting there just wasting CPU and memory. So you can have more advanced bean packing, for example. And we have the other side of the house, which is eventing. And eventing is a project that gives you the control plane and the data plane APIs to implement cloud events. And cloud events, a CSCF project, is becoming a standard for these integrations. And TriggerMesh is very big in this type of integration of different clouds, different systems. So how do we handle those events? And if you combine both, it's the perfect thing to do. For example, uploading a file to the cloud, sending a tweets, anything that happens on the cloud, or even automation of IT, things that don't happen all the time, but you want to have events, and different people have handlers in your organization to handle those events, or creating we have end user companies creating e-commerce platforms where they have end users, handling things like store orders, bills, those type of events. They become events that happen in the real world that they get handled by your code that you can put in functions. So you can build a functions as a service system. So in a nutshell, Knative allows you to get the best of Kubernetes, giving you a better abstraction to create serverless applications that you can like scale to zero, and also that control plane that you can orchestrate events and handlers and put them together in a way that you work with Kubernetes. So you take advantage of all the Kubernetes building blocks, and then you put something on top of it that you can build your own platform, or use a vendor, for example, that uses those APIs, implement those Knative APIs, and give you that access to the API in a standard way using a CNCF project that is vetted by the end user community. So in a nutshell, that's Knative. And for people that are not familiar with it, they will see what it gets to install it in less than 5 minutes. And saying about 5 minutes, if you have used Knative in the past, they have gone through different iterations, so making it easy to install, and also having more options to configure Knative, for example, different networking layers, and we're going to go deeper into that. But you have the choice to have only serving, because maybe you have use cases that only are doing Knative serving, and you have eventing. Maybe you have only use cases that care about cloud events and being handled by your normal deployments configurations in Kubernetes or external services. But at the same time, you can install either or put them together, where your events are handling by a Knative serving that can scale to zero when no events are going on, and scale up from zero when events are going on. So in 5 minutes, we have gone through, in less than 5 minutes, we made it a very, very simple to install and get it up and running, and the footprint very minimal base if you choose one or the other. And we're going in deep into those specifics and give you a demo. Everybody wants to see something running, so I think that's what the web seminar is about.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Yeah, so what Samir and I are going to do, Samir is going to show you how to do the installation of those pieces that Carlos just talked about. So the serving component and the eventing component. So we'll show both of those, show the installation of those. So we have a Kubernetes cluster running. And so basically we're going to do the installation of those components. And then we'll talk about configuring the networking. Now this is going to be a little different. If you're doing it on your own, it's a little different based on where you're installing, but we'll talk a little bit about the networking layer. And then I'll flip back over to myself, my terminal, and I'll show you how to do a very quick example of serving and eventing. And one thing before I flip over to Samir is I do want to mention the knative.dev website. So the docs here, if you're missing a piece or you're like, I want, step-by-step guide, this is really where you can find a lot of the documentation, the tutorials, including the separate pieces, and some code samples. So this is kind of where we've been pulling from. So if you're, want to get started on, set up using this and you want to follow the tutorials, it's knative.dev is how you find that. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Samir, if you want to take over, and we'll flip over to you.
Let me just share my screen. Yeah, hey guys. So I'm going to quickly walk you through the process of deploying Knative, the entire stack that, as Carlos said, serving and eventing on a Kubernetes cluster. To make it easy for anyone to follow, what I've done is I have set up a MiniCube cluster, which has 4 CPUs and 8 GB of memory. The MiniCube cluster is already running in my system. This is going to return, and I can see that it has got things running in it. So to deploy Knative on this cluster, it is pretty straightforward. What we do is we hop over to knative.dev docs, and we select the latest version that is there, and we go to the installing section. So now Knative has 2 ways of deploying to your cluster. One is using the YAML plain old YAML, and other is using the Knative operator. We'll just pick the YAML way of deploying Knative, so it is much simpler just to follow. But the Knative operator deployment way is also simple, but we are just going to pick one of these. So click on follow this link and get to installing Knative using the YAML files. So deployment of this, so first we deploy the serving component followed by the eventing component. To deploy the serving component, we just need to execute these two kubectl apply commands. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it in my terminal. Yeah, the first command actually deploys or creates all the CRD definitions in the cluster, and then the second command goes and deploys the core components that get the serving Knative serving up and running. So once we have got these two YAMLs deployed, Knative requires a networking layer to work. The networking layer allows us to communicate with the services that are running in the cluster. So there are various options that you can select for your networking layer, which goes from Istio. Istio is the service mesh solution. So it has a lot of features that you may not need for your application. And Courier is a networking layer that has been developed by the Knative project for the specific use of Knative. So if you don't really need the service mesh functionality, then you may just go with the Courier networking layer, which is also very lightweight compared to the other solutions. So to deploy it, again, we just copy this command and deploy the YAML file. By default, the Knative serving is configured to use Istio, so we need to tell Knative serving to switch the networking layer to ingress. For that, we just copy and execute this command. Finally, just before we go ahead, we can make sure that this Courier service is running. We can see that the external IP is pending. This is because I am using MiniCube to install. So we can get over that by running the command MiniCube Tunnel, which will create a tunnel and expose the load balancer, our IP to the load balancer, so we can access it directly. Now, if I is it not coming? It is going to ask me for the password. And we should see the external IP is set. So we are halfway there. So before we go and deploy the Knative eventing, let us take a look at the pods that were deployed and make sure everything has been deployed properly. You can see that it is still in the process of deploying. So let us wait for everything to get deployed before continuing. A few minutes and it should come up. Yeah, so I think it is up. If we look at, no, it's not. It's getting there. Let's wait a few more minutes, maybe. Courier is not yet deployed. This is taking a little longer than anticipated. The courier itself is not started. Yeah, it took a little while, but everything is up and running. All right. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up the DNS that is going to be that is going to be used to be accessed the services to access the services. So there are three options. You can use a real DNS, that is when you're using a real IP, you can configure your domain name provider to point to that IP. What we can do is we can use something called a magic DNS, which is a service that basically allows us to use our IP directly without having to configure a DNS server. So I'm going to set that up. It is going to configure the default domain. So far, we've just been copying and pasting stuff. That is how simple it is. Let us just wait for that default domain configuration to be applied. Minute. We're moving on to eventing. Probably I'm having network issues and maybe the images are getting taking a little while to get pulled. But yes, that is done. Default domain probably should be set up by now. Let us go to eventing part. And again, the installation of eventing is similar. We just copy two YAML files. First, we deploy the CRDs for the eventing component, and followed by the actual Knative controller, eventing controller. So let's just wait for this to get deployed. Once that is deployed, we deploy the eventing, and before we can hand off over to Chris, let's make sure all the pods are up and running. Deploying stuff. Okay, and then we wait for the pods to come up. So I think that is the case. My internet is taking a bit to pull the images, and that's why it's taking a little longer. Otherwise, it would have been less than 5 minutes. While that is happening, there are a bunch of other things that can also be deployed. That is something called channels. There are in-memory channels. There is Kafka-based channels. There are also a bunch of eventing extensions that are available. That is things like GitHub sources, Apache sources, and things like that. So you can integrate with your application with GitHub by this with the help of this community-built eventing sources.
And While we're waiting, Samir, there's a question that just came in the chat. Maybe you can take a quick look at that.
So the question is, do the YAML files have to be deployed in sequence as per the steps shown, or are there strict dependencies like CRDs first and then go? Yes, you need to deploy the CRDs before you go and deploy the core components. That is, I believe that is the reason why they are done in two separate steps instead of combining them into one. There probably are issues that are coming from Kubernetes that don't allow that to happen in one go. So yes, you need to deploy the CRDs first before you deploy the core components. So yeah, eventing has also been deployed. Yes, go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, there's a question on which way is better to production environments, YAML or way of operator. So there's also in Knative, we offer a, in the screen, you can see install with Knative operator. That Knative operator, I think we're going to rename it because I usually try to make the clarification that this is not the typical operator that does the Knative work. This is like an installation operator that helps you install Knative. And like the person in the chat was saying, do I install the CRDs or do I install the core? The operator takes care of that. It would install the YAMLs for you. So you just create a CR of I want serving on eventing, and it would do it for like behind the scenes. We'll do YAMLs. There's always YAML, but it will do it in the right order. It will retry, and it will do that for you. So in terms of production, you want to use an operator or just wrap them in Helm or use GitOps. But in terms of the community, the installation operator is a good fit for people that are used to using operators or a helper installer inside of it. And there was another question about ordering, about the networking needs to be first or second. Is things like Istio, Contour, and Courier, that's kind of a network piece or plugin that then it works, like you will get Istio from the Istio community, or you will get Contour from the Contour community, or a product that is using it. There's no ordering there because Knative doesn't check that you actually have it installed. That happens at the time that a CR gets created. So you can install that network piece before and after, but everything will reconcile eventually. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yep. Thanks, Carlos. There was one other question in the chat. Did you happen to see that one, Samir? Maybe just since I know you're going to wrap up your section and hand it back to Chris. Something about
the question is yes, the question is about MiniCube tunnels and whether it can be used with kind or micro Kubernetes. I am not really sure, but probably you should be able to use it. That would be my good guess.
Yeah, the answer to that, we have, I don't know if you want to show the website, that we have something called the quick start. So we yes, you can get that the work that the tunnel is doing to give you like a domain name or host name that is in your computer with port 80. We have a kind, if you do the quick start, this is a Knative CLI plugin that it will actually create the kind cluster for you and configure that domain name that you can like is working on your laptop port 80, or it will create the MiniCube for you and it will actually install Knative serving and eventing. So that's another option. Like if you want to kick the tires locally with kind of MiniCube, you can do it. In MicroK8s, I will say hold on, because the MicroK8s Knative plugin, do not use that one, is outdated, but we're working with that community. We have some PRs open to make the Knative plugin to MicroK8s use the latest version and have a better user experience. So with MicroK8s, do not use the add-on that comes with MicroK8s. But if you have MicroK8s by itself and you want to install the YAMLs, yeah, go ahead, install the YAMLs, and then you will need your load balancer, which you would use something like KubeVip or what's the other load balancer? I'll put the name in the chat, and then I have tested MicroK8s, but just with the YAML. MetaLB, thank you. This is the people in the chat knows more than me, but yeah, Kubernetes is Kubernetes. Just make sure you have the version that is compatible with the version of Knative. In this case, 1.4, you need Kubernetes 1.22 or higher. Sorry, Samir, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm going to hand it over back to Chris, and he's going to demonstrate the serving and eventing parts.
Yeah, thanks, Amir. So what I'm going to do, so what I've done here is I've got my own MiniCube installation. I actually use, I think Carlos wrote a script that's on his GitHub repository that has a whole full, MiniCube's installation, with all of the waiting for everything to come up and everything. So maybe we can drop that link in there as well, because I found a lot of use out of that myself. And so what I have here is I've basically replicated the same thing that Samir had, which is just a MiniCube running with serving and eventing already installed and Courier running. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some examples, and these are again from the website, from the knative.dev. And so what I'm going to do is show you some of the testing that you can do just to make sure that things are working, right? So these are kind of simplistic examples, but it can kind of show you the power of what these types of things can do. So you can see here, this is a YAML file of a serving test that I've written. I shouldn't say I've written. I've read the YAML file, and basically what this is doing is saying, you define things like, okay, here's the API version, so you can see it's from serving. It is a service, is the kind. So I'll usually point these out because the objects that it creates, this is going to be a service object, and we're giving it a name. So we're saying it's going to be, the name is hello, and here's some of the specification that you can do. So this is a prepackaged container running this hello world-go. So it's a Go application that really just returns back the message. And you can see the environment variable here. The target is Knative. So what it's going to do is usually it says hello target. So this is going to say hello Knative because that's the environment variable that we've passed in. So I'm going to go ahead and do kubectl apply, and I'm going to do the Knative serving. And so you can see here, it's going to say hello, the service is hello is created, right? So we've made the service. And so now what we're going to do is, I'm going to move my window. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get that service. So I'm going to do kubectl get ksvc hello. So you can see here's the details on that service that has been deployed. So you can see, some of the details about this, including the URL. So now what I can do is I can take this URL, and the service that we have, if I just do a curl of that, you can see it returns hello Knative. So this is the Go application that is running. We use the environment variables that we passed in. So now it's saying hello, target, and target we put in there was Knative. So that's basically what this serving is doing, is basically serving up this URL so that I can curl this and get the response back that the application is programmed to do. So this is an example of using serving just by itself. This is not using eventing. This is just using serving. And so now what we'll do though is we're going to do some eventing. So the eventing example is going to be a little more involved. So we're going to do eventing. So let's go through what this is doing. This is a multi-part YAML file. So instead of having separate YAML files for each object, I've created one YAML file with everything in it. So here we have, here's the separators. If you've never seen this, the 3 dashes is a separator of the different objects. And so here you can see, this is our broker. So the kind is broker, it's from eventing. And so the broker is kind of the centralized hub. So you can basically have everything come into the broker, and then the broker is going to trigger to actually do things with it, right? So as events come in, the broker then uses the triggers to know what to do. So here we have down here, this is basically an app. You can see the kind is deployment. And so this is hello display. So again, this is an example from the Knative eventing. You can see here's the URL here. So we're pulling the image. Essentially what it's going to do is display whatever event it shows, right? So this is sort of a good way of debugging things, right? Is when an event comes in, we're just going to show the event, right? So instead of passing it on to something else to do something with it, we're just showing it so we can see that it's got an event in here. And then here is the actual declaration of the service. So we're saying use the deployment that we created and create a service out of it with some ports and selector information here. And then here's the trigger. So again, this is saying, here's my name of my broker. So when an event comes into the broker, if it matches this filter, so here's the attributes type greeting, then we're going to send it to the subscriber here, which is service of hello display, right? So we've defined the display, we've defined the broker. Now we're defined the trigger saying anything that comes into the broker sends it to the display, right? So that's what those 4 different pieces are doing. And so now if you kind of extrapolate that out, you can have logic that, starts filtering and splitting and sending events all sorts of different places. But so this is a little more complicated of an example, right? And so one thing I have to do, I think this is just because I'm running on MiniCube, is I have to do, so I'm going to do kubectl apply of the Knative eventing. So that created 4 different objects. So that's all 4 of those objects that were in that YAML file. And then we're going to do kubectl apply. I think we just have to do the domain mapping. So again, I think this is really just for me. It's mapping it to my local domain here. So that's really all this is doing. And so now what we can do, I have a giant curl command. And so basically what this is going to do is it's going to pass in. We're gonna take a look at this and send it in here. So what this curl command does, so this is the curl. So what it's doing is saying I'm sending it to the broker, right? So here's that example broker. That's the URL of the broker that I'm doing. We have some cloud event specifications here. So say hello, the spec version. You can see here, this is important. This is the type greeting. So one of the things we're passing in here, if you remember that trigger, it said filter and look at the type of the event, and only if it's greeting should we send it along, right? So that's what that trigger is looking off of. So we're adding that in as a header, so that way it's in the cloud event definition here. And you can see there's the source and content type, and then here's the actual message we're sending is hello Knative, right? So we pass that all into the broker. The broker should have triggered. And so what we can do is we can do a kubectl logs. I'll do -l. Actually, here, this is the whole command. App equals hello display, right? So we're going to actually get the hello display pod that's running, and we're basically going to say, show me the logs. And here is the data that we got from and with all of the context. So this is the cloud event specification. You can see the type was greeting, the source was not send off. So these are the things that I passed in, and you can see here's the data, right? So this is now just displaying that data. But again, you could take this and pass it along to other parts of your application, create a full event flow, to say if this is coming in, it had this, it matched the filter of the type, and we're going to pass it along to other parts of our application. So that's kind of the 2 examples that we have here. Again, these are from the Knative documentation. So, there's a lot of different code samples there. So you can check this out and kind of explore some of the options that are available. But yeah, that's how quickly you can get up and running with a serverless application running on top of Kubernetes, right? So now I'm going to switch
There's
back
a question,
over.
Chris. Sorry to interrupt. There's a question that just came in on chat. Maybe you could address that before you leave your terminal here.
Yeah, let me find the chat. Where was the chat?
I can read it to you if that's easier.
Observe and monitor if the event has been sent properly to the service. Samir, you've been, I think you guys have been working on a lot of this, but essentially, since these are all Kubernetes pods, you can use any kind of, one of the benefits of it being on top of Kubernetes is any other tooling that you have around Kubernetes, whether it's logging, monitoring, using Grafana, sending things to Splunk, or even if running Kubernetes on AWS, if you're using some of the AWS tooling, basically it all uses that same tooling, which I know, it doesn't mean that's a specific answer for you, but the nice thing is it's like, hey, if there's Kubernetes tooling that you're used to and that you like to use, this basically can plug right into that, just since it's just an extension of Kubernetes.
I can add a little bit of context on that one, Chris, if you want.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
So that, yeah, the observe and monitoring is a big space in terms of observability, your logs, your metrics, your tracing. We are working with Kubernetes. So in terms of Knative, like Chris says, is working on Kubernetes, and our control plane and data plane. So in Knative eventing, we have two aspects of it. It has the control plane that reconciles these channels and subscriptions that are working, but then there's data plane, like, messages and data going through these, for example, the dispatcher and the broker implementation and channels, and those have metrics that you can like tap with Prometheus or tap with something. So those metrics will give you like overall, like, I don't know, last night something happened during an hour and there were 100 events that were an error. Like, for example, you get error and there were errors on a certain number of events. But then in cloud, in Knative eventing, you have more power to do something with it, right? Because one thing is like 100 events were not delivered or have problems delivering, then what? You don't know which events were at, what is the data of that event, which event it was, what was the event ID, or if you want to process those events in the morning. So we have something, I can paste the link in the chat, called event delivery, that in your definitions of your triggers, for example, if you use some Berkeley triggers, you can define what are the non-functional things of like a dead letter sync. Then if you're familiar with dead letter syncs, so if there were 100 events that happened, like something was not working properly, you can configure like how much you want to do back off, right? If there was something with back off or retries, and if it can actually not be delivered, those events can be routed to something else, right? So it could be something else that maybe you take that event and put it in the data store. It could be a database, or it could be another queue, to see like in the morning you can do SRE operations or automation that says, there's 100 events sitting here. What should we do with this? Should we tell people that the events were not processed on time, or it's just something that can be async and we just process the orders in the morning and everything's fine? So one thing is observing that something went wrong, but then what to do with those events that something actually went wrong, and like doing something functional about it. So we in Knative eventing, we give you that second one also. So Kubernetes give you the first one about metrics, and we give you metrics about, how many errors it happens, something is failing in that data plane in terms of metrics. But then the second one is you have the power here to configure how you actually want to do with those cloud events that have problems, like and that letter sync is one pattern to that. I hope that's clear. Sorry, Chris.
No,
I
that's
went to my
perfect.
architecture mode.
No, that's great. I'm happy you had that ready to go. That's good. So yeah, we can definitely include some of these links in after the webinar. Just include some of those, but. So, yeah, great.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks everybody. Thanks to all of our presenters. Thanks for everybody who came today. I'm really glad that you were able to join us. Thanks for all the questions. There were a few that asked, one in particular, you asked for kind of like a list of all the commands. So we will be sure that when we send out the email with the link to the recording, we include that as well. But thanks to all of our presenters today. This was really great. I learned a lot, and I hope everybody did. So to wrap up, you have here on this slide several links. TriggerMesh is the cloud native integration platform company, and if you want to learn more about what we do, you can check out any of these links. Chris Parlett gives a monthly tech talk where we show you some of the things that we're working on at TriggerMesh, building on top of Kubernetes and Knative. So that's kind of cool. You can check that out. And then, of course, as we've shown you throughout this webinar, there are just a ton of resources on knative.dev. So if you haven't gotten plugged in there, you definitely want to do that. You can follow the project on Twitter. You can get plugged into the Knative Slack, which is great. TriggerMesh has a Slack as well, and Samir and Chris and others are always on there and happy to answer questions that you may have. And then finally, very exciting, coming up next month in Spain is the very first Knative Con. And so Carlos is going to be there. A couple folks from TriggerMesh are going to be there. So if you are planning on going to KubeCon Europe and haven't already added the Knative Con to your registration, we really hope you'll do that, because there'll be a lot of great talks, and it'll just be really awesome to get the community together for this first conference. So with that, I think we can wrap it up, unless Chris, Samir, or Carlos have any parting comments that they want to add.
Nope. Just wanted to say, yeah, that we do have the Slack channels. You know, I know I've seen Carlos posting on the Knative Slack. So feel free to chat on there if you have any questions. You know, everyone's in the community has been super helpful. You know, just with anything I've ever asked. So feel free to just jump in and say, hey, I'm getting started. You know, I'd love to know more. Yeah, you know, everyone's really happy to help out.
Yeah. Check out the like we show you what's a good thing that we show you the website. So there's different install methods. So you can try the quick start that give you kind and MiniCube. You can use the YAML files that we showed today. You can also use the operator to install it. You can also use it in different forms. So give it a try. We have different ways of installing, and we want to hear your feedback. Join Slack. For Knative Con, if you're attending KubeCon or if you want to attend, Knative Con is one of the co-located events happening this Monday and Tuesday. So ours is Tuesday, and then Thursday is where the main KubeCon event happens. But if you cannot attend for a reason, you can also do virtual. So you can actually, this is a kind of like premiere that you're going to be able to watch the Knative Con day. So it's a whole day of Knative talks. I work on the program committee, and the schedule looks very nice. The schedule is out there. You can actually see the talks and the abstracts, and you can see the different aspects of end user talking about how they're using Knative in their company, to things about Knative functions, which is a new initiative that we have in Knative. But if you're not attending, you can actually watch them as part of your main KubeCon program. The co-located events are included for free virtually. So that's what I've been told. So hope it stays that way. So we hope to see you either there in person or online.
That's awesome. I'm really excited. Great. All right. Well, with that, we are going to call it a wrap. And thanks again for joining, everybody. And watch your email for the link to the recording, as well as the resources, so you can, have a really positive experience getting started with Knative. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.